here in Costa Rica. Every day it's sunny, mid 70s, mild breeze, good sun tanning weather on the balcony. Yes, sir.
Well, today is February 6th. Yesterday was a big day for you, Jim. Your Patriots came through. Not to talk too much about the Super Bowl and social political events, but it was a hell of a game. I mean, it was just history was made.
Yeah, I spent 21 years in Boston with my career. It's funny, I call it a career. I giggle when I call it a career. I had 3 jobs in Boston, and I probably attended a good 15, 16, 17 New England Patriot games, mostly in the old Sullivan Stadium, but one in the new Gillette Stadium. I caught it in its first year. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Brady. I was amazed that without a real strong running game, the Patriots won, and I almost turned it off at halftime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at halftime, I was exclaiming to my wife, "I wish I had bet more on the Falcons."
Yeah,
and that was a dumb statement.
Yeah.
Certainly turned out to come back and
but
bite me.
history was made in 3 respects. Brady's the only quarterback to have 5 rings.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Belichick is the only coach to have 5 rings. And it was the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history. The previous big comebacks were only 10 points. This one was 25 points.
Yeah, and is it just icing on the cake that Belichick and Brady are both like avid Trump supporters?
Yeah, I don't pay much attention to that. What I do pay attention to is a lot of rumors that I've heard that Belichick has made some serious enemies in Las Vegas.
Oh, really? Interesting.
For not cooperating. This is just, rumor from... Now, take this as an interesting little factoid.
Mm-hmm.
Costa Rica is well connected to Vegas through sports windows.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be through online betting, but that's not so prevalent anymore. But what's left over is the guys who did it, they're still living here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've heard is that Belichick did not cooperate in previous years with, say, like the Patriots being a 12-point favorite. Well, give up that extra touchdown at the end. It doesn't mean any difference. You're going to win by 4 anyway.
Right.
He doesn't cooperate. He says F you to them. And that's why there was the inflate gate after the last Super Bowl victory. It was vengeance.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
And furthermore, they got a preliminary about 4 years ago where the Patriots were fined for videotaping opponent practices.
Mm-hmm.
Like 20 other teams do, but weren't singled out. So Belichick has made some enemies. Mm-hmm. He's a very smart, quiet, reserved fellow. Mm-hmm. He earns a lot of respect, but he does not have any friends in Vegas. That's what I have heard. So,
well,
anyway,
I'll tell you what I've heard is, the Russians have now hacked the Super Bowl. I mean, the democratic process is one thing, but leave our damn Super Bowl alone. I lost $50 because of these people. Come on.
Yeah. Well, what can you do?
Right. Anyway, let's move on, Jim. Let's talk about gold for a minute, specifically gold price revival, as you have so eloquently put it. Why is the time frame so hard to pinpoint on the gold price revival?
Because the crimes are never ending. There was an incident about 4 or 5 months ago where an airplane was shot down over Indonesia. It was loaded with gold. It was supposedly heading toward, let's just say, a black hat port, a port where the bad guys control. And it was shot down, and the gold did not end up in the banker cabal hands. Okay, but if it had, that would have bought them another year.
Mm-hmm.
And the word I heard was in January of 2014, the global currency reset was already all set. 100 nations had signatories.
Wow.
And then the United States and the Mossad of Israel decided, well, screw you. We're going to have a Ukraine uprising.
Mm-hmm.
And let's blame it on Russia on the most absurd of foundations. Mm-hmm. And let's delay it again. And it just goes on. It's a crime scene. Okay, what murder will come next month?
Right.
What theft of national gold like Tunisia or Algeria will take place next month? These Arab Spring revolutions have as a secondary motive to steal their gold. The Syrian gold has not been stolen, but they're still trying, Will.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that the Russians are helping to protect Assad and his gold from the Bush family, the biggest plague on mankind in our modern history. And they're all over the place. They managed to get the Libyan gold, yep. Tunisian gold. What's the other one? Morocco? No, not Morocco. Anyway, a number of the different nations in there, they got the gold. They did not get Egypt's gold. They tried. But there was a military coup.
Right.
And the ruling clan, whatever it is now in Egypt, they're making buddies with the Russians, who are helping them to protect their gold. It's funny. It's laughable, ironic that the Western press talks about gold not being valuable, but and earns no yield, but it's an object for theft and pilferage in their wars.
Well, it doesn't earn any yield right now, but do you think maybe it will when it's money again, Jim?
Well, it actually does earn a yield if you do what Warren Buffett did at Berkshire Hathaway, and that's sell option calls on the silver that he holds. Mm-hmm. But he got called away. That was back in, 2005?
Something like that.
He got called away and lied through his effing teeth.
And what was the dollar value on that? Let me look that up. It was a huge investment.
Well, he bought it at 7 and sold at 9 and claimed that he sold too early.
Yep.
Well, that's what happens when you get called away on your option covered call. He was earning something like 7, 8, 9% a month.
With the options, yeah.
With the option call income, yeah, but at the risk of being called away.
Sure. 130 million ounces, according to this quick thing I just pulled up. Yeah.
Yeah, 129 million, 130 million, yes.
Wow.
So, it doesn't earn a yield, but you can put it to work. Mm-hmm. You can look at the 150-year period from around 1820 to 1970. It's one of the most prosperous growth periods in the history of mankind. It was during the gold standard.
Right. And a pretty limited government, too.
Small. Yeah, I suppose there wasn't the big welfare state. Mm-hmm. There was plenty of war, though.
Sure.
Because there's always an opportunity to steal another people's wealth. Mm-hmm. That's been a sport for 1,000 years or more, maybe 5,000.
Well, yeah, and let's look at the last 3-4 presidencies. The last 20 years plus the last 30 years. I mean, how many countries have we overthrown, Jim? I mean, from Panama. Back, what was it, Reagan? Jeez, I mean, all the way now, it's just absurd. I mean, do you think Trump, how does he play in with this? I mean, the Iran piece, to me, is very interesting. What deals do you think Trump made with the devil or devils, or did he? And how do you see this interventionism playing in with his administration?
When Trump began to get some steam and momentum in the primaries, our guys put our heads together and say, well, who's he beholden to? And right away, several of us put up, including me, well, gee, he came out of bankruptcy several times, so that's got to have some effect. Mm-hmm. And the end result of our little discussion was a couple other guys, not me, said, well, he probably has some very good friends at very big banks, and he owes them. And I think we're starting to see the Goldman Sachs deal with the devil. Mm-hmm. There are 6 men from Goldman Sachs in his administration and cabinet. It's not just cabinet posts, but I mean, I don't even think the head of the Economic Council is a cabinet member, but it's a very strong post in itself. But, you know, nevertheless, I don't dismiss Trump for that. I just put up my antenna. Mm-hmm. It could be, and this is a position of The Voice. The Voice tends to believe that Trump might have Goldman Sachs people in there, but with a clear understanding that they have an agenda to carry out in order to save the country because, and this is a sick little side point, because if the country is ruined, Goldman Sachs cannot exploit it any further. Mm-hmm. So, save the country in order to save the victim for the squid, the vampire squid. Right. I love that Matt Taibbi metaphor. It's a beautiful. They stick their nose in, and out comes capital mm-hmm. from theft and fraud and legitimate business. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a lot more fraud than it is legitimate business. It's market rigging and things like that, insider trading. So he made a deal with the Goldman Sachs devils, but among his financial crew is Judy Shelton. That's his main economic advisor all through the campaign. And I don't know whether she's going to be supplanted as second fiddle to the main guy. I can't think of his name. I think it's Cohn, C-O-H-N, the Economic Council head. But anyway, Judy Shelton is an advocate for the gold standard. So it could be that Trump invited these Goldman Sachs characters, I don't want to call them scum, because they might have actually left Goldman Sachs because they didn't like some things they saw. Right. But I do believe once Goldman Sachs, always Goldman Sachs, they have you by the testicles, the heart, the soul, whatever. Mm-hmm. They've got some of your pension lined up, and they'll steal it if you don't toe the line. But my guess is that they probably were told, we have an agenda for the first 6, 12, 18 months, whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they can control that initial period. But the second chapter might be, we want you, Goldman Sachs, because you're so expert. We want you to install the gold standard because we're going to be working like crazy to obtain and source the gold without selling out the country. By that I mean, China offered something like 10,000 tons of gold, but they wanted to be in control of the banking sector. And the U.S. said no. So we move on. Now, I don't know how we're going to secure the gold for a legitimate gold-backed dollar without someone else's gold, because Papa Bush and Rubin and Clinton are not going to give up what they stole at Fort Knox. Mm-hmm.
Unless it's,
they're not going to give it up. And besides, they spent a good deal of it.
Okay, I was going to say unless it's stolen back, but yeah. They squandered half of it.
No, they haven't squandered. They've used it. They've bought. I hear that a good deal of gold was used in buying a space fleet. And I'm not talking about a space fleet that goes 25,000 miles an hour. I'm talking about a space fleet that goes a couple million miles an hour.
Okay, probably a good investment.
That could go, say, to Mars in a day and a half, or maybe a portion of a day, where they might have some outposts. Mm-hmm. Anyway, you could go on and on about that, but there's a second purpose besides space fleet with, very fast propulsion systems, and that is the underground cities. Mm-hmm. There's a network of them, probably 20. I bet you at least 10 of them in the United States. I've seen pictures of them. One of their biggest challenges is growing food under artificial light conditions. Mm-hmm. But there have been a lot of stories that a Virginia underground city, a Boston or New England underground city, and a San Diego underground city were all collapsed.
Mm-hmm. You sent me something. I'm in San Diego. You sent me something a couple of weeks ago about people hearing explosions. We always hear stuff around here because of all the naval activity. I mean, if you hear a big boom, it's the Navy or it's the jets up in Del Mar doing their thing.
Well, they're breaking the sound barrier, but there could also be something that might be a little more powerful that knocks you off your feet a little bit.
Well, the underground base, or whatever you want to call it here, is really no secret. In fact, I'm a surfer, and Black's Beach is a surf break right up near Scripps, just north of La Jolla, right near La Jolla Beach.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Black's is world renowned. It's probably arguably the best, one of the best surf breaks in the whole state of California. Certainly in Southern Cali, I mean, one of the top 5, right? And it all happens because of the bathymetry or bathymetry, the way that the ocean floor is shaped as it comes in to the beach, causes the waves to do something, to change, to break a certain way. Well, in this certain break, Black's, there is a huge, and you can see it from Google Earth, there's a huge underwater cave. And it's the public story, or the official story around here. It's part of Scripps Oceanographic Institute, and it's right there off of Scripps, which is a big institute right next to the university in La Jolla. But anyway, yeah, that you look at it on Google Maps. I mean, you can pull the thing up. It's a huge cavern right underneath the water.
Yeah, well, I don't think that is what the target was. It might have been the adjoining underground city. Mm-hmm. These underground cities are refuges for the elite after they destroy the earth. Mm-hmm. After it's filled with viruses or radiation or whatever. Mm-hmm. But now that many of their refuges have been collapsed, they might not have the motive to follow through with their destruction of our environment.
I like that. That's a great way to slow them down.
Yeah, well, you can also slow them down by killing them.
Well, that would be preferred.
Or as the voice likes to say, Jim, you'd be surprised to know how many of their second-level elites have lost over 90% of their paper wealth.
Wow.
Yeah.
But the Dow's at 20,000, Jim. From
two main ways of loss. Mm-hmm. The voice told me back in, this was about 2014, middle of the year. He said there's 7 giant gold vaults in the world. The Bush family had been using one, and to their shock, much of their gold was rehypothecated. So that's one way they can lose their gold. Mm-hmm. And the other way they can lose their wealth is simply having accounts frozen. Like some elite might have some very big accounts in Indian bank systems, mm-hmm. or in Hong Kong, and they get discovered. The real owners are found out, and they freeze the account. And before you know it, a third-level Rothschild has lost 80% of his money.
I wonder if these elite scumbags just are not aware of Bitcoin and its amazing ability to make wealth just go off grid completely, untrackable, untraceable. It's probably a good thing.
Yeah, well, there are lots of ways to protect the money, and there are lots of ways to lose the money, but the most vulnerable money is paper wealth. Mm-hmm. But we just had a big laugh among our colleagues back in 2014, when the Bush family got rehypothecated. And the voice put it very simply: they weren't watching their gold closely enough. Because they're arrogant.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We got a lot of...
Well, I was very happy to start off the Super Bowl seeing HW come out drooling on himself to flip the coin. That just made me all warm and fuzzy. But let's move on. Back to gold, Jim. How is the gold trade note likely to come into view?
I think it's coming into view right now. Let's back up a little bit. After the Iran sanctions of 2012, Iran found a way. They found a loophole. You see, the Obama administration, they weren't very smart. They talked smart. They talked big. They tried to carry a big stick by, knocking down defenseless nations that don't really have an army, like in Syria, like in Libya, like in Yemen, like in Ukraine. But they're really a bunch of pussies, and they weren't very smart, because the Iranians found the loophole that the big national banks could receive payments and then do some swaps with their central bank, because the Obama administration morons just put the ban on the Iranian central bank. So Iran went out and arranged for oil sales with India. This is the model. Iran sells oil to India. India buys gold from Turkey. India delivers Turkish gold to Iran, all done through second-party big Iranian banks. Everybody's happy. No dollars in the transaction. So that was a giant FU to the United States, which is getting caught with doing a number of illegal things. That's what some of the fines are all about, that the United States does not like to talk about. But there's a big amount of money moving into Iranian hands from the U.S. government to pay for the fines, because many of the sanctions violated international law, which is not a big concern for the U.S. government, because we have full spectrum dominance. Okay, so the model was there with Iran, India, and Turkey. Now, step forward. You saw this 2 years ago. I made some calls back right after the Ukrainian war began. I said, watch the Russians sell oil and gas to China and not involve the dollar. And it later got a name in some of the press, like especially Zero Hedge, which is one of the most significant websites, I think, in the West for breaking great news and making great analysis. The point was that the Russians were selling China oil and gas and accepting RMB currency, the Chinese currency. And, gee, where did the Chinese find all this RMB currency? Well, they were redeeming their treasury bonds. They've been busy for 2 years redeeming their treasury bonds. They're buying Russian energy. Okay, then the big news came in April of last year that Shanghai was selling an RMB-based contract for physical delivery of gold. So there you have it. The Russians sell China oil, they accept RMB, they cash in their RMB and walk away with gold from Shanghai. That does not involve a third party. It instead involves the Shanghai market, which means the structural foundation for the gold trade note is now in place. Conduct your trade, take RMB, convert to gold in Shanghai. People might say, but Jim, that's always been there. No, it has not. You could not take your Saudi oil, pay for it in treasury bills, and go to London to convert to gold. They would tell you to go shit in your hand. But in Shanghai, the RMB can be converted to gold, and take a look at some of the statistics, and you see Russia is buying more gold every single month from Shanghai. They're converting their oil sales, and I think there's some LNG and natural gas sales in there, but China is predominantly oil, and they're building pipelines, and the Russians are accepting RMB for pipeline construction as well. So it's not just the oil trade, it's the oil infrastructure as well.
And they're
This is very big, and I think we're going to see formalized soon a single contract called the Gold Trade Note that will involve RMB in commercial trade payment, like, say, for Saudi oil or UAE oil by China. or by Japan,
wow,
or by South Korea, or by Indonesia. But this is the structure of the gold trade note coming into view by virtue of Russian oil sales with China and RMB conversion in Shanghai to gold. There it is.
And Jim, that window you just mentioned is providing a liquidation mechanism for treasuries as well.
It is, but you know, you got to convert to RMB, and there's trouble doing that. So it's not that simple, Will.
Okay, okay.
The Shanghai contract is for RMB.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be, I think, a heavy discounting coming for treasury bonds as they're being dumped.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of central banks discharging their treasury bonds, and it shows up in the tick data. I think those are redeemed at 100 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot more that's not being redeemed for 100 cents on the dollar. It's from big banks trying to get rid of theirs that are not central banks.
So this is all happening. I mean, this is all happening very quickly.
It is, and this is the end of the petrodollar,
mm-hmm.
with a rise on the same scorched earth, a rise of the petro yuan,
mm-hmm.
the petro RMB. Okay, the gold trade note, it's almost by definition, it's by, like, what's the word? Expedience. The gold trade note is going to come from oil sales because oil trade is the biggest commodity in volume in the world.
Thanks to the petrodollar.
No, as the petrodollar is gone,
right,
the petro RMB is going to come in oil sales.
Just replace it, essentially, right?
To replace the petrodollar,
yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And it needs its formalized structure. What was the formalized structure before? Well, the OPEC nations led by the Saudis would sell oil, take treasury bonds, and stuff them in a trunk and not convert them.
Mm-hmm.
It was called the petrodollar recycle, the Arab oil surplus recycling program. They left them in treasury bonds and never converted them out of dollars. But the Russians and Chinese are converting to gold.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the basis of the gold trade note. It's going to happen, I think, when the formalized oil trade gets its structure. And Shanghai is critical. I smelled this last April, and I've been waiting and waiting to see when are we going to have a much bigger volume in Shanghai. When is it going to involve the oil trade? Because I've known for 2.5, 3 years that the petrodollar was being dismantled ever
mm-hmm.
since mid-2014. The question of when's the petrodollar going to go away, that's not a good question. It's how long has it been in process
yes.
of being dismantled?
Right. Correct. Yes, this process, per your point, started or became evident to you guys in 2014. Here we are 3 years later, 2.5 years later, and it's still in process. And it's probably, would you say, fair that we may see major fireworks this year as it pertains to the removal of the petrodollar?
Yes, we're already seeing fireworks. It's called the Yemen War.
Mm.
The United States has basically said to the Saudis, you know, you can dump your treasuries all you want, but, you know, you got to buy a lot of military equipment. And, hey, look, maybe you have a good war.
Gosh, so does
you
Trump...
You can buy our phosphorus bombs, and you can bomb the hospitals, and don't worry about war crimes because we control the United Nations, and the Saudis went and bribed the head of the United Nations not to be charged with war crimes in Yemen.
And that
this is very convoluted.
This was the Obama administration, correct?
Yes. Yes. So I'm really curious how Trump's going to handle this.
Right. So basically, we sit and watch at this point. We see what is Trump going to do with the Iran, with the. I mean, is he going to continue? I mean, one of the. How do we avoid a third world fate, and how do we avoid World War III?
Well, notice that there was some reports a couple weeks ago that Trump is backing out of the United States participation in the United Nations.
Yes.
That could have something to do with the Saudis and their war crimes? Don't know. Don't know. We're not told the details. We mere unwashed mortals are not told the details. We're nothing but vassals. But we can object and we can fight by joining the gold bandwagon. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, I think the Trump piece, it's just so interesting to watch. There's one of his speeches, it's titled on YouTube, the best 5-minute Trump speech you'll ever hear or something. And it's him talking about the criminality. It's him talking about taking our country back, putting Americans first. I mean, it's really moving, the speech that he gives. And it doesn't, I don't think it's from a place of BS. You know, what did this guy, he didn't come into the presidency to benefit himself. The guy's already a billionaire. I mean, think about it. I think what we're going to see is all these little pieces carefully being orchestrated behind the scenes to many of us onlookers. Oh, great, he's appointing Goldman Sachs people. Oh, great. But let's wait and see. I have a feeling we're going to be positively impressed. We covered the petrodollar. You said that Jack S. believes the petrodollar death is 90% complete. In what way are the elite globalists on the run? You know, you talked about some of these bases, some of their hideouts being subverted and destroyed. What are other ways that these guys are scattering like roaches?
Oh, there is a White Dragon global initiative. It's not the harmonious world, or could be related, I don't really know. It's not the debt jubilee. It's more like the Patriarch Kirill from Russia, from the Eastern Orthodox Church, meeting with the Pope, which is the center of the Western Satanism, and saying, we need to start doing good things for planet Earth. We need to respect the Earth's integrity, and we need to stop the bank fraud. We need to put out of business the Western elite bankers that are bankrupting the world and who have largely destroyed the global economy. This is a result of 40 years of fascism. It's a staged process. But there are many Western elite players, and we're not talking about just the 3 or 4 top people. I'm talking about the 200 second and third level people who are running big banking systems and who give the orders for certain national politicians with their puppet strings. The Voice is on top of this, and he told me back in late 2015, I remember because I just remember where I was living and what office I was operating out of. He told me that something like 90% of the Western elite have signed on to this global positive initiative to protect the planet Earth and to bring about sound money and restore the global economy. About 90% had signed on. And the holdouts were the upper-level Rothschild, upper-level Rockefeller, and upper-level Bush. And I said, well, what about Clinton's? And he said, don't worry about them. They're going to be dead before long. Mm-hmm. And this was over a year ago.
Wow.
And I said, wait a minute. Be dead? What do you mean? Bill Clinton is going to get rubbed out? And he said, no, he's very sick. It'll become clear in another year.
Well, I've seen a couple pictures of him where he looks far less than healthy. You know, bloodshot eyes, and it looks really, really bad.
He looks like he's drooling. And you could always say he must be looking at some fine-looking 38-year-old woman walking down the aisle, but I think he's just drooling because his brain's messed up. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I don't want to get into Bill Clinton, but it was interesting that he said over a year ago that Bill and Hillary Clinton will not be factors. And I said, you think Hillary's going to run for president? He said, yeah, but don't expect her to win. The Voice has got very good internal connections. It's not just in finance, banking, and gold. It's a very good connection. The gold power centers have very good intel, and that's an important point. So I think we've got a good deal of the main crime families of Rothschild, Rockefeller, Bush. The Clinton family is within the Bush family.
Mm-hmm.
They worked hand in glove when Clinton was governor, and the Mena Air Force Base was used to move cocaine, and the cocaine went straight to Panama or from Panama. The money went back to Panama for their banking system. Panama's an interesting place. It gets loaded with all kinds of good stuff and bad stuff. I like to think of Panama as having three elements. It's got all the South American legitimate. It's got the North American and the Latin American drug money. And it's got the local Panamanian canal income, which is about $9 billion a year. Now just multiply that by 100.
Wow.
To make it per capita equal to the United States, because they got 3+ million, we have 300.
Wow.
So they have $9 billion a year. Call it $900 billion a year. That's significant.
It's incredible.
But they've also got a lot of mining for a little country, and evidence of that is they've got 86 million pounds of copper plates.
Wow.
That they had intentions to put together with their 250 tons of gold to make a South American dollar. I'm sorry, Central American dollar. Now, if you don't think 250 tons is a lot, multiply it by 100. So you get 250, you get 2,500, you get 25,000 tons per capita equivalent.
That's a lot of gold.
That's a lot of gold for little Panama, and Panama had intentions of becoming the gold lease agent and center for the gold-backed Central American dollar for Latin American trade, like the gold trade note using Panamanian gold, and maybe they'd bring in other gold, like say from Brazil or from Bolivia or from Peru. The Andes is loaded with gold.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so anyway, the movement is well afoot, well in progress for converting much of the global elite. And notice that in Davos, they had a real shitty barbecue this year. They had so much internal angst that they were actually questioning themselves.
Wow.
As to whether they were the problem.
Are you serious? Wow.
Yeah, and the answer is hell yeah, you're the problem.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, notice my big complaint about Davos is they call it an economic forum, but I think you could count the number of CEOs at the forum on less than your 10 fingers.
Yeah, it's a bunch of academics. Yeah.
Well, it's not just academics. It's big financial funds. It's central bankers and the elite bankers like, Wall Street and London. And throw in some European bigwig elites. But, gee, in, what was it, September last year, was there the St. Petersburg Economic Forum hosted by Putin with something like 270 CEOs from companies? That's an economic forum.
Yeah.
What you have in Davos is a central banker barbecue where they probably had some pedophilia going on in the basements at night.
Well, you brought it up, so...
I'll leave it there.
Well, just this morning, there was another, I saw on the CBS or something came across the tweet, another 100 people busted sex trafficking. Right here in San Diego, 38 men arrested or something. Of course, last week, or even this weekend, it was like days ago, we had a huge sting in Los Angeles with 400 and some odd people, hundreds of arrests. I mean...
yes, they're very odd. I agree they're odd.
They're odd. I saw something that said this was someone's opinion that these lower level busts that are taking place right now are all being done to garner evidence and witnesses, and that the major arrests are coming soon, and they're going to be bulletproof. They're going to have bulletproof cases because they'll have from these lower level arrests they'll have witnesses and what have you. So
they're turning state's evidence. They're flipping, as they say.
Man, yeah. I got the champagne already cold.
Well, I'm not going to celebrate until I see people like Hillary and John McCain charged with pedophilia and treason and forced into resignation.
I hope. I feel like it's coming, my brother. I feel like it is coming. We'll see.
Well, it could, and I'd like to make a definition distinction.
Please.
The press likes to use the word pedophilia.
Yeah, they also like to normalize it, Jim, like it's a sexual preference. Did you see that article? I'm not a...
Yeah, I know. But that's apart from my point. My point is they're trying to use the word pedophilia to cover a vast array of crimes, including child murder and sacrifice on satanic altars.
Yeah, that's a bit more than pedophilia.
They're trying to call that pedophilia.
Right.
And it's a little bit more than pedophilia. I regard pedophilia as grabbing a little girl's tutu or grabbing a little boy's thingy. And I was a victim of the latter in the Catholic high school system of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Grabbing the little boy's thingy happened at least 6 or 8 times from 3 Franciscan order Christian brothers. That is pedophilia.
Yep.
But
it is.
If they snatch a 9-year-old girl, make her a prisoner for sordid sex, and then disembowel her and drink her blood on the satanic altar, that is a little more than pedophilia.
A bit more. I mean, we could say sex trafficking is even more than pedophilia, right? Of course it is. Yes, it's not dismemberment
murder and satanic sacrifice. In order for what they believe to be gathering in her vital juices from the blood.
Yeah.
You know, they think it's got some genetic, high-powered, what do they call it, elixir. And they might be right, but, I draw the line at killing kids.
Hey, speaking of the occult,
I draw the line there.
Speaking of, man, what did you think of that Lady Gaga performance? I thought there was going to be a goat sacrificed or something. I kept waiting for the goat to come out. I mean, it was pretty clean. There wasn't even any crotch. Crotch grabbing.
They learned from the Super Bowl, what was it, 4 years ago, in the Superdome, where the lights went out because they had a satanic halftime sacrifice with the satanic Beyonce.
Oh, gosh.
People don't realize a lot of these entertainers are Satanists, like Little Nicky, like Jay-Z, like Madonna, like Lady Gaga, like Beyonce. They're all Satanists.
Yeah, they've all been to those, Abramovich, whatever her name is, to her dinner parties.
Oh, I don't know who you're referring to, but I try not to pay any attention to any of them. But back in that Super Bowl, I think it was 4 years ago. I don't know exactly the date. I think it was February 2013. They turned the lights off. And they stayed off for half an hour to ruin the entire halftime show. Wow. And the story later was that the White Hats had had enough of the Satanist bullshit performances, because just a few months earlier in London, the closing ceremonies of the London 2012 Summer Olympic Games was a festival of Satanist symbols.
Yep.
So they gave themselves away, and then in February of 13, they had the lights turned off.
Do you remember what city that Super Bowl was in? We could look it up.
I'm pretty sure it was in the Superdome of New Orleans.
Okay. God bless them, man. I'm glad they did.
Yeah. Well, they might have given a warning to the Houston bunch that you make this a positive halftime show or the lights are going to go out.
Yeah. Well, she being Lady Gaga, she was behaved, and it appeared anyway. I saw something that people were waiting for her to just do some big Trump dump. But they advised her that the halftime show's never been booed, and that if you did that at the NFL game, you'd be booed off because most of the attendees were probably Trump voters. I don't know if that's a fair assumption or not, but
I try not to pay any attention to Lady Gaga. I think she's kind of a phenomenon, farce, freak show.
Oh man, you should have seen the last Lady Gaga thing because I'm a big fan. You should have seen her. Somebody sent me something a couple of days ago before the Super Bowl where she was on a live performance, recently, and one of her performers on stage with her vomiting on her, like on her body, and they're performing while she's sticking her hands down her throat, vomiting on Lady Gaga. Yeah.
Well, that's the satanic version of a golden shower, Will.
Oh God.
Okay, let's move on. I really don't like this subject.
All right, buddy. So what will finally wake up the masses, if anything? When the sheep will awaken, who will they blame? And what do you see as the potential flashpoints?
I think the sheeple. The first part of the question is what will awaken the sheeple, and I think it's going to be a combination of two things. A lot of shortages out there, like food and gasoline, mm-hmm. and at the same time, a number of their bank accounts are just going to vanish. It could be the 30% bail-in, but it could be just vanishing bank accounts. It could be bank failures, and the mid-sized bank failures will all be to the advantage of the bigger banks, because the bigger banks might be owners of the little banks. But the people are going to see shortages and lost bank accounts, and that'll waken them up. Mm-hmm. But don't get ahead of yourself, because I don't believe you're going to see a widespread awakening of the American public where they're going to say, oh my gosh, look what these evil elite central bankers have done to ruin our lives. Instead, they're going to follow the cue from the corrupt news organizations, and they're going to blame China and the other countries that hold our debt and who are dumping our debt, government debt, and causing a currency crisis, because the news is going to focus on the currency crisis being the major problem, and it'll be China, Russia, Iran, and whatever.
Trump, certainly.
And it will, they're going to blame Trump for angering them.
Yeah, yep.
Or riling them up.
Yep.
Or forcing their hand. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But, Trump has a very difficult job in going ahead with progress toward the gold standard. But here's some of the things that he's actively working on that I give him credit for that I really hadn't thought of myself. I know that the Chinese have been buying commercial buildings. They own approximately 1/3 of all the major U.S. cities' commercial buildings. I mean, gather together 15 top U.S. cities, including Dallas and Salt Lake City, all of them. And they own 1/3 of the commercial buildings. So they're converting their treasury bonds into U.S. hard assets. But Trump apparently is working towards something much bigger. He's arranging now, and I don't know whether this is all been signed and sealed, or whether this is a plan in progress, a project at work. But he's trying to get at least $1 trillion of Japanese pension money that is in the form of U.S. Treasury bonds to be not converted, but to be put to work to build the U.S. infrastructure back again with highways, high-speed trains, toll roads, bridges, port facilities, maybe even fiber optic lines linking cities, maybe even wireless connections, high speed too, maybe solar plants, and just a lot of things. Call it all infrastructure. Now, if the Japanese do that, my first question is, what's the income stream going to be for that investor? Mm-hmm. And there's really not a lot of profit for building a port. There's a lot of profit for a toll road. Right. But infrastructure is the basis on which businesses are built. So it's going to be kind of interesting. I have a feeling that a deal will be struck with the Japanese where they can build the infrastructure and then have, say, something like 5% royalty of any business that's built upon it.
Wow.
Where the businesses will have some corporate tax breaks with the U.S. government. By the way, U.S. corporate income tax is the highest in all 20 industrialized nations. It's one of the biggest reasons for outsourcing. Mm-hmm. That's something that Trump is going to try to reverse. So next comes China. What I'm hearing about China is there are a lot of Western and U.S. businesses in China, and they're all being not ordered, but heavily urged to return back to the U.S. and put your plant and equipment on U.S. soil, because deals will be struck again for income tax benefits, and it's got to be at the same time property tax benefit. You got to have both. Mm-hmm. Free trade zones usually involve property tax benefits and income tax benefits for a period of like 3 years. I'd like to see Trump have a national initiative of having 50,000 new companies formed in the United States each year, because we must export in order to relieve the $550 billion trade deficit, which hangs over the whole prospect of a legitimate new currency. Okay, I'll give you an example. Suppose we come up with 10,000 tons of gold, and we back the dollar with that gold, which would be worth what? I don't have the exact figure, but I think it's going to be on the order of $1 trillion. The
dollars in circulation?
No, you back. Well,
based on the gold price.
Based on the gold price, but an elevated gold price.
Right.
Okay, I don't know what 10,000 tons of gold is worth. I'm sorry to say I'm ignorant. 1 ton is 32,000 ounces.
Hang on.
So at 16, no, that's silver. I don't have the figures in front of me. My point
$64 million is 1 ton of gold. That's at $2,000 an ounce. So obviously it's going to be less.
54 million?
64 million, and that's at $2,000 an ounce. So it's going to be more like 40 million today's prices.
Okay, so that's 1 ton, right?
1 ton of gold, yep, is 64.
All right, so multiply by 10,000. I have trouble with the zeros, to be honest with you.
It's a lot of zeros. It's 4 zeros.
The point, maybe you can come up with a number soon. The point is that after 1 year, the U.S. must be then vulnerable to forfeit $1 trillion worth of gold, because it's our trade deficit. We can't do this. Can't do the new dollar without relieving the trade deficit. And Euroraj has come up with an argument. He believes that foreign business ventures can come in with an explosion of new companies and export, like say from a Chinese foundry or a Chinese farm on U.S. soil, export to China on a new business. Buy up a U.S. business and send out the export products. And that would relieve much of the $500 billion trade deficit. But what new problem would that cause? Mm-hmm. Shortages.
Right.
So we're not going to get out of this clean. But I think Trump is going to maybe do a better job than Obama or the moron Bush ever could have done. And by the way, I'd like to say that I believe Obama is every bit as dumb as a rock as Baby Bush.
Mm-hmm. Great orator.
He's just a good speaker. He's just a good teleprompter reader. You take away his teleprompter and he's not a very good speaker.
That's true.
So
your number's about $500 billion in today's prices. It's $640 billion at 2,000 an ounce. So at 10,000 tons.
Okay, so the entire 10,000 tons of gold is vulnerable in the first year, just from a trade deficit. So my reasoning is that Trump might come about with a plan for the new dollar that's gold backed, but only if significant foreign industry comes in place in order to magnify in a tremendous growth path the exports, which will have the inevitable consequence of shortage unless it's all new capital. and you cannot bring out new capital and export in a matter of a few months. That takes a year or two. So I think we've got a year of vulnerability, even with the new Scheist dollar, with the legitimate backing of gold. And Trump has kind of let it be known, without saying so directly and specifically, that he wants to back the dollar with gold, but he doesn't want foreign gold because we'll lose control. Mm-hmm. The Chinese have offered to lease gold on their terms, and their terms involve Chinese control of the banking industry rules in the United States. So the U.S. turned that down. I'd like to confiscate whatever Bush gold is left. Just confiscate it like eminent domain. Mm-hmm. Find a reason. Don't worry about it. Just confiscate it. It's not lying on U.S. soil. I think it's in very well hidden Panama vaults and very well hidden European vaults. But I don't really know. That's beyond my knowledge base. Anyway, okay, so let's move on.
What is the ultimate signal for you, Jim? The ultimate jackass signal that the evil banker cabal has capitulated, even slightly?
For me, it's a strange one. It's the end of the chemtrails.
Oh my God, you're kidding. That's mine too. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. I don't doubt it, because we're on the same wavelength on a lot of things. Well, there's a second one, and that is that the vaccines have been revealed as containing dangerous adjuvants, contaminants, like mercury, and being laced in many cases with the actual virus.
Yep.
They're killer vaccines. Mm-hmm. The killer vaccines were all through Western Africa with respect to Ebola. Mm-hmm. And the interesting story that was told by the natives was that the Red Cross arrived to give Ebola vaccines, and the only dead people were those who were vaccinated. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So the locals in Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and some other country began a murder campaign to kill the Red Cross workers.
Killing the people administering the vaccines because they knew that's what was killing them.
They were killing the natives.
Wow.
And the Red Cross packed up and left for home. And Bill Gates of Microsoft has blood on his hands from that laboratory, along with George Soros.
Wow.
So it's chemtrails and revelations on vaccines. But, it could be something a lot more direct and to our liking, like the elite began cooperating on competing gold-backed currencies and banking systems, where they try to promote the Bank for International Settlements in Basel as one of a few alternatives. Not the only, but one of a few alternatives. And that would, to me, mean the financial capitulation. And they're gonna do their dead level best to have Basel serve as the global repository for gold. I'll give you an example. Bolivia. You want to sell your industrial metals to China and receive finished products from China? That's all well and good, but you need gold trade notes, so you need to post 1,000 tons of gold with Basel in order to facilitate Bolivian trade. That's what I don't want to see. I do not want to see Basel serve as the global repository for gold that facilitates the gold trade note. I want it to be multipolar. I want China to have some, India to have some, Indonesia to have some storage of this gold. I want South America and Brazil to have some. I want Peru to have one. I want Panama to have one. I'm talking about multipolar storage of gold for the purpose of gold trade notes and their usage to facilitate global trade. Mm-hmm. I want Basel to compete with the others because if they compete, they'll be forced into honesty. But there'll always be an elite group that favors Basel and will get their treasures stolen. Because that's what Basel does. That's where the Nazi headquarters is for global bankers. And, you know, I don't need rubbish email from people telling me that I use fascism and Nazis interchangeably and incorrectly. I believe the U.S. neocons are fascists from the Nazi German bloodline, starting with Papa Bush, son of Prescott Bush, who was a devoted Nazi sympathizer in Germany.
Financed Hitler, didn't he?
Well, he's involved with financing. I think all Wall Street in London were involved in financing the German Nazis, and that's one of their dirtiest secrets. It's not being held as secret much anymore.
Yeah, HW's granddad, I guess.
Chemtrails, vaccines, and gold standard.
Well, the chemtrails are the silent killer. Nobody talks about it. You know, Trump hasn't said anything about it. You know, I had an interview with you, I don't know, 6 months ago where I got all optimistic and I hadn't seen him in a while. And boy, my clients and friends all over the country started sending me pictures and saying, nope, they're still spraying. And sure enough, days after my interview, I look up and they're just painting.
But it's not anywhere as bad, Will. I was told that California and the South had a couple months with no chemtrails, and I got a reason for that. There are a lot of Air Force bases in Southern California.
Right.
So they don't like spraying their own kind.
Well, I don't know if there's any correlation between the spraying and weather modification and actual precipitation, but we've had a very wet winter in the West. A very wet winter. In fact, I think a 100-year drought was just cured in California because of how much water we just had. And I'm down here in Southern California, and we've had a ton. So in Northern Cali, they're literally underwater. I wonder if there's any correlation, if there's any connection between a decrease in spraying and, oh, now we're getting a lot of rain. I don't know. Now, so the chemtrails, it might be out of our, you know.
Okay, well, chemtrails have a cousin project of blocking California natural rainwater. And that was done with HARP weapons, creating a wall that would prevent the natural flow of you know, rainstorm masses.
Yep.
You know, cloud masses. And they blocked it for several months. And there's a reason for that. It's called the Bush family. Again, they're the plague of humanity. The Bush family is involved in vertically integrated water investments. I'm talking about water purification, water storage, water delivery, you name it.
Right.
Water, water, water. 5 different levels, vertically integrated. And their investments all went way up in value as a result of blocking through the HARP weapon of the natural rainwater. I keep thinking of wall. It's a HARP wall that they created to stop the rainwater.
Like a pressure wall, right?
Yeah, it's a pressure wall. It's like it just gets sucked upward rather than falling. It sucks upward and goes somewhere else.
Back into the atmosphere or whatever,
But there's more to this, because in the Pacific Northwest, you have United Nations helicopters doing chemical spraying to interfere with natural rainfall up there. So it's UN colluding with the Bush family to screw up the rainwater and all the water systems on the West Coast. I believe that the white dragons have threatened various elements, and I believe that they have forced the hand, and maybe it was the mid-level Western elites that signed on to the white dragon positive momentum to restore the Earth's integrity and monetary system. Maybe their influence stopped